Good afternoon, folks. It's back for more development, and today we are going to start off with something a little bit different. Now, I had left the game running for a long time, and basically all my containers had filled up and everything production-wise had stopped. Which is good, because when I've switched everything back on, or I connected something to a warehouse, everything automatically started going again, which is exactly what we're looking for. Okay? So, we can see here that everything is basically starting up again. Our graphs had actually emptied, although they should be back now. Yep, as you can see, and you can see here that our blues are low, but that's going to go up, or at least it should. Let's take a look at our minutes, and we can see here that we have data which is basically running out. Now we're stopping at 10. Okay, so be aware of that. We are actually stopping the data at 10 minutes and then turning it into hours, and that's because we're going to work on our hour thing. Okay, but what I want to start with today is what I get asked a lot in a lot of different roundabout ways as to what I use for various things when I'm developing. Okay, so we're going to have a little look at what I use. Okay, now obviously I use Unreal Engine. Okay, doesn't really matter what version, 4.27 at the moment, version 5, whatever. Since this channel or this game is being developed in Unreal Engine, then that's the default. Okay, so after that, since I do a little bit of work in C++, then we have Visual Studio. Okay, so at the moment it's Visual Studio 2019 is what I use. Okay, so to work with C++ files, etc., you will need Visual Studio. Now this is a free version, so it doesn't cost you anything. You can download it, install it, and get to work on that. Okay, so what do I use for general like texture stuff? Well, normally I use paint.net. Now I'm not an artist, I don't do an awful lot, it's very simple stuff. Normally it's either like really simple icons or modifying icons or modifying already existing textures, etc, etc. So I don't really need a complicated program. Okay, so paint.net does it for me. I can do the transparencies, add stuff together, make icons out of other things, blah blah blah. Okay? Paint.net, I'm used to using it, works for me, does everything I need it to do. That's what I use. Paint.net, again, it's free, you can download it and use it. Now, another one I have is for more complicated stuff is Krita. Krita is more like your Photoshop stuff. It's for artists. You can do a heck of a lot more with it than Paint.net, although I don't usually use it very much. Okay, but you can basically do the same things. But as you can see, it's got a lot of stuff, a lot of brushes, all sorts of stuff. This is more like your alternative to Photoshop, which I have never used in my life. Okay? So Krita, it's free. You can use that. Free to download if you're into art stuff. So you can use that. Now, there is one that I know is used a lot, which I do have, but I think I've opened it once, and that's Gimp. Okay? So Gimp is another one. I would say it's an in-between. Right? It's in between Paint.net and Krita, where Krita is the sort of Photoshop alternative. Gimp is kind of in between. Again, a lot more extensive facilities than Paint.net. You may be used to Gimp, you may like Gimp, nothing wrong with that, but it is another alternative, and again, it's free. Okay? So that is the three that I have. Okay. Next, we can move on to sound. Now, the sound stuff, this is where we move into a slightly different territory, right? Because when I'm making tutorials, obviously I use the sound stuff to record sound, but you also use this if you're amending sound effects, or you're getting a sound effect and chopping it up, stuff like that. So we use Audacity. Okay, so Audacity, you can bring in sounds, chop them up, do noise reduction, change the tone, change the speed, change the octave, do lots of stuff, right? You've got distortions, echoes, all matter of stuff. Hi there, Mr. Spock and Pooh Bell. And so you've got, this is basically for recording, okay? So you can, as I said, manipulate your sound effects, your wave files, and then you can export them back into Unreal Engine as a wave file, etc. So again, Audacity, it's free. You can download it and use it at your leisure. Okay, so next, modeling. Well, most people, there's just one choice, right? Unless you're a professional modeler, or you've got a lot of interest in modeling and you're prepared to pay for the likes of 3D Max or Maya or whatever, then really everybody's choice is Blender, right? Don't really need to say anything about Blender. Blender is pretty much an indie developer standard. Everybody uses it, right? I'm not great at Blender, but it'll do everything and more that you want regarding modeling. Okay, so you can create your UVs, you can create your models, you can export them, etc., etc. Not an awful lot more to say about that. Again, it's free. There's loads of plugins. There's loads of stuff that you can do with it. You can do your animations, your models, your UVs. You can do all sorts, right? So that is pretty much synonymous with indie development and modeling, okay? Next, I use, for texturing, I use Substance Painter. Okay, now this is the first in the list of items that are actually cost you money, right? There's no way around it. Okay, so, but a lot of people think that Substance Painter is a subscription, but it's not, right? You can buy standalone versions off Steam, which is what I have. Right, now there's always sales going on, as you know, Steam sales. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it's around $50 for Substance Painter, but you'll always get it like on a sale. You'll get it for $30, $20, whatever. So keep an eye out for that. Okay, now the only caveat is that it's not going to be the latest version. Okay, and you're not going to get updates to features. Okay? But you will have everything that you need. Okay? There's nothing that I've ever seen that is an absolute like game changer, and it will stop you actually making stuff that you can use in your game in an older version of Substance Painter. Okay? It's very powerful. It's got its intricacies, but you can actually get some decent results with just the basics, okay? Now, this goes for every single piece of software, okay? You will get out of it what you put into it, okay? So the more you learn Substance Painter, the better results you'll get. The more you use Unreal Engine, the better results you'll get. The more you use Blender, the better results you'll get, right? And that's basically the same for every single piece of software, okay? You'll start being able to do more complicated things. The results will be good. Then you'll take it a step further. But it all takes time. Okay? So I'm no expert in Substance Painter. I tend to come to it, do what I need to do, and then I forget everything I just learned. Right? Because I don't use it enough to cement the knowledge into my head, right? But let's just do a little example here on Substance Painter. What have I got here? I don't know if this is actually going to do anything. We'll try it. Okay, Mr. Spock will be interested in this one. This is a snooker table done in Substance Painter. Okay. So you can see here that we've got our nice wood grains, stuff like that. We've got the beige table, etc, etc. Then you can like preview it and stuff. You know, so you can give it an X amount of time to allow it to actually perfect the textures and stuff. Like, you can give it, at the moment it's set to 300 seconds, so this is going to render and clear up any issues, and it'll do it for 300 seconds. So it'll take 5 minutes to finish its render. Okay, but we're not going to wait for that. We're going to come back to here. Now, the benefit, I'm going to do this on something a bit simpler to show you the, right, what we got. Don't even know what this is, right? Okay, this was for a windmill for my previous game, I believe. Okay, so basically the windmill had like this model, except the texturing wasn't to my liking. Okay, now, so what you can do in Substance Painter is, when you're ready and you're happy with your texturing, when you actually export, it will export in the format you want, right? So you can select like what game engine you want to do it for. You can select what texture sizes you want, like whether you want 2K, 4K, 1K, 500. You can export all of them, right? So you can export all the different sizes. And when you see, if I select Unreal Engine, it'll output 3 different textures. One will have the base color, one will have the normal map, and the other one will have occlusion, roughness, and metallic. Okay? So basically, when I do this and I export a texture, all I do basically is bring it in something like this, where this will be the base color, this will be the normal, and this will be the ambient occlusion, roughness, and metallic on the different channels. Okay? Now, in this case, this was a little bit different. I actually produced an emissive texture as well, and I'm using this in here. But under normal circumstances, I'll just have these 3. Okay? So that is about that. Now, on a different tangent, or if you're creating, let's say, a video of your gameplay or a trailer or something like that, then I use Powerdirector, okay, for video editing. Okay, again, you can buy this on Amazon or whatever, and I think it's about 30 to 50 bucks again. And again, it's an older version, but it does the job. Okay? You know, you can make your videos, you can splice them together, put in the sound, chop up the video, make effects, transition effects, etc. All your video editing stuff, that's what I use. Okay? So for doing my tutorials, that's what I use. For doing my game trailers, etc., that's what I use. Okay? So what else? What else do we actually use? Streamlabs, right? For streaming, I use Streamlabs. Right? Not much to say about that. Now, the interesting thing that I do, that you guys should try and get into the habit of, is using what you've got and changing it to what you want. So, for example, in my game, we have different buildings. Okay? Now, let's say we're looking at the fabricator. Okay? Now, I didn't create any of this. Any of the models or any of that stuff. Basically what I do is I use what I've got. I mix and match things together that kind of fit, that make kind of sense, and that's what I use, right? So always look in your assets free from the marketplace or stuff you've bought, and then repurpose it, okay? This is made up of different items from a free asset, okay? And I've just used certain items to give me the effect I want. So in this example, right, I have let me see. So let's say you've got an environment set. No, that's probably the wrong thing. Right, industrial area. So here we have lots of industrial stuff, right? Now you can repurpose this to your own thing, right? You don't need to use pre-built blueprints or whatever. Right, you can just take and mix and match the individual meshes to what you want to use it for. Okay? Right, so I don't think I used any of this for this, but there's a couple of pieces that could be used here. Right? Like the lathe, maybe. Or pipes or whatever in here. I could use this stuff, right? Now that's not what I used. What I did use was stuff from this pack, right? So you'll see tables that are like this thing and this thing. These things are actually in the refiner, the piping, the big sort of liquid container. You'll see these as an input, that's one of these, right? And I join together different things. I have the robotic arms, stuff like that. So use what you've got, right? Repurpose it for your needs. Right, so you've got these cardboard boxes and stuff which can go here. As I said, use what you've got, repurpose it. Now you might want to retexture it, okay? So maybe you've got this thing here, right? The container. Right, well you can take a look at the mesh, right? And you can say, well, I can export that, right? So I can export the mesh and then pull it into Substance Painter, right? And then change it, right? But at least I don't need to recreate the mesh, okay? All I need to do is recreate the textures, okay? So I'll repeat it again. Use what you got. Right, now if you're happy to, recreate a model or change the model, I mean, what you could do is you could change this model, right? You could export it, bring it into Blender, make your changes, then bring it back in, export it, do your UVs again, use Substance Painter, retexture it, and off you go, okay? So the name of the game here is use what you've got, repurpose stuff where you can, And that's that, right? So now the actual mesh I use for the fabricator looks like this, right? So I've used wires, I've used more wires, I've used the control decks, I've used containers, the seats, the conveyor belt, the robot arms, etc., etc. Okay? And that's how I can get I'm not saying they're going to be, I can get reasonable placeholder graphics in place without having to model everything again, without having to texture everything again. So just look at what assets you've got. If something is going to fit within your game, then repurpose it. Okay, make the changes you need to make, then you can save a huge amount of time just repurposing graphics. And the other thing is repurposing not only your graphics, or sorry, not only your meshes, but particles, right? So you can repurpose all of the assets, right? It depends what you've got, right? So for example, the other night somebody was asking me about a refraction. Well, actually I'd already done exactly what he wants to do, right? But all I did was I repurposed a particle system. Okay, so for example, it was in an explosions pack, right? All I did was I converted it to Niagara. I basically switched off everything else. And that's the wrong one, so let's close that down and see the proper one. Right, and it's this one here. So what I did was I switched off every other emitter except the refraction. Okay, and if I actually go into the world outliner here, I have actually got, I can actually show you what this looks like, right? If I go to player start, right, I can pull in this system into the window, and as long, you see it? Now I need to pull it closer to the player start. Now where is the player start? In relation to that. It's way over here. So we'll drag it closer. And it's obviously not in line. Don't know why I'm doing it like this. I should just have set it to the exact same place as the player start. But hey ho. Right, so it's nearly in line now. Ish. Okay, so it's not in line. So what we'll do is we'll copy this and it's at 0, 0, 0. So basically what we'll do, I don't know how it ended up there. So if we go to player start, right, you'll notice if we click on this now, you can now see the refraction. Now, as I said, this is all, if I press play now, you'll see the refraction happening. Okay? Now, the point here isn't for to show you about refraction. The point here is to show you how you can use all of the things at your disposal that you've already got, then to repurpose those things. Okay, so don't be afraid to change stuff that you've already got. Just make a copy of it, duplicate it, and then muck about with the things you've got, right? So there is an example there with chopping up one particle system, taking one part of it and turning it into something completely different. Okay? And that is basically how I get stuff on the screen that doesn't look horrible in a short amount of time. So, as I said, all my buildings are done the same way, right? Some of them better than others. Like the refiner. Right? That's just the same thing. I just keep it in, you know. This is the things that you would expect in a sort of refinery. You would expect your liquid pipes and stuff like that. And all this kind of stuff. I just kind of try and keep it as reasonable as possible. The weird one is the miner. Again, that is just from another asset pack. And it's from a science pack. Like a sci-fi science pack. I just repurpose it for this. Right? Again, nothing complicated. Same with the player base. Right? Just use like a warehouse type building. Put on top of my base. That's it. Okay, I didn't model any of these. I just basically pulled them out of another asset, repurposed it, probably didn't do any texturing at all, and used it for that. So that'll give you an idea of how I put things together as quickly as possible to give me some results on the screen that aren't too horrible looking. And hopefully that'll give you a couple of ideas for yourself. Okay? So, back to our game. And the thing we're doing here is we are now checking just while we look at it, this rocket is a repurposed rocket, right? I've stuck a particle effect on the end of it, which is from somewhere completely different, the trail. And then I used an explosion when it hits. So that's basically coming from 3 different assets. Okay? The drones, again, comes from our asset pack. I think it's the same one actually. I think it's the same like industrial thing that for some reason has drones in it. And all I did was use the drone model, then programmed it to do my own thing. Okay? So, what we're doing at the moment is we're doing the hours now. Okay? So let's get back to our graphs. Oh yeah, the other thing is I do the exact same thing with materials. Right, if I want a specific material effect, what I'll do is try and get something that's close and then tweak it. Right, I won't create the material from scratch. I'll basically get the nearest thing I can to what I'm trying to do, and then I'll mess around with what's already there to get like a new effect. Okay, so that is the way I do things. So we are now looking at when moving stuff. If we remember rightly, we are moving stuff after 2 minutes from the seconds bucket to the minute bucket. Okay? Then after 30 minutes, we're moving stuff from the minute bucket to the hour bucket. Okay? And then after 24 hours, we'll move it from the hour bucket into the day bucket. So that is keeping our array as small as we possibly can make it. Okay? Now, the only other way we could make it any smaller, and it isn't really making it any smaller, but it would actually help us in a way, is if we separate those arrays into the minute array, or sorry, the second array, minute array, hour array, and day array. Right? Because then we're not having to trawl through the whole array when we're doing a graph. So depending on if things start slowing down because of our array size, then we might look at that as a possible optimization, right? But for the moment, as long as we're splitting them up and making the array as tight as we can, then if we do need to do that, then it's going to be easy for us to recreate the new arrays. Right, so what we're going to do in the meantime is we're going to change this to 4 minutes. Okay? In fact, what we'll do is make it 3. Okay, so things are only going to be allowed to be in the minute bucket for basically a minute now. And then they'll all get put into the hour bucket, which means that we can actually do our hour graph. Or at least we can start on it and see what that actually does. Okay, so we're going to now and what do you mean by enable height on a material? If I understand you correctly, I think what you're talking about is the normal map or tessellation. So we are returning our data. Well, I mean, it depends what your normal map looks like if your normal map is correct. Right, but the sort of fake height is a normal map. Okay, like the bumpiness. Right, you'll need to be more specific about what you're talking about here, right? A normal map does not change the height. A normal map is a kind of smoke and mirrors thing that gives the impression of height. Okay? The UV has nothing to do with height. The UV has absolutely zero to do with height. The UV is just the X and Y coordinates of a flat texture and how they correspond to the points on a mesh. Okay, that's it. A UV is always a square. Well, the colour's nothing to do with a UV either. Yes, it depends on your program what colour it is, right? But it's nothing to do with the colour, right? It's got zero to do with the colour. Right, so anyway, I'm not 100% sure on what you're talking about. I can't really take a look at Discord right now because I'm streaming. It's just a representation, Mr. Spock. The ultraviolet has nothing to do with anything. It could be pink with blue spots. It doesn't matter. It has zero relevance to what it actually does. You know, it's like saying this is blue. It's only blue because it's blue. Because the developers decided it was going to be blue. Right? It could be pink, could be yellow, could be invisible, could be anything. Right? It's just an arbitrary decision on what a UV map is represented by. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to pull that to there and that to there. Tidy that up a bit. Right, you guys have managed to put me right off my train of thought here, so I'll congratulate you on that. Right, so if we look at minute data, this is the minute data, and we're pulling minutes, okay? And I actually think we can do exactly the same thing as this, except put it in the hour data. And where did that go? Oh, it's not a problem, Dante. It's just it's hard to switch between things and answer your question while I'm trying to do stuff. Right, there it's there. There's our function there. So let's drag that to there. Okay, now I think at this point the only difference is this is going to be hours. Okay. So I'm going to save that for now. I've got this temp time index. So all we need to do, and this never works for me, but in theory we should be able to just say temp time index, and it's going to be an integer, and that never works for me. So we just replace these basically. We probably don't even need that one. Actually we do. So we just replace these ones. And we get that. And we plug it in there. We delete this one. Right, we don't do that. We delete that one. And then we put that up there. Okay. Right. So if we join this up, and we select that and the widget, right? By the way, Mr. Spock, you should notice that my conveyor belts are actually going to the right place now. We fixed that last night. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to join all these up. We're going to leave it running for a minute. I'm going to grab a cigarette, and then when I come back, we should actually have some data. Or let's say we should have enough data. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn it on to the minutes, and it will be blank for now. So I shall be back in a very short time. We'll leave that running. Hit the like and subscribe if you're enjoying it, and we shall be back in a moment. Okay, so we're back. And we have some data now. And you'll notice that this data isn't going very far. Okay? And that's because we are transferring it out of the minute bucket once it gets to greater than 3. Now, there are some anomalies which we need to investigate, but fundamentally it's doing what I asked it to do. Okay? And now, if we get the hour data, I have absolutely no idea what it's going to show. And that's kind of what I expected. But fundamentally, what we can do is we can actually have a look to see what it's actually given me. Okay? And that's going to be in our event graph when it actually gets the data, which is here. Okay, so it's return relevant chart data. So if I put a breakpoint here, there it is, it hits it, and it's nothing. Okay, now that's kind of what I expected. But it shows we are going into the right place, I believe. Okay. Now, the interesting thing is if it's coming in here. Which it should be. And there we go. We are definitely hitting this data. And that is kind of what I expected. But we shall see if it's actually adding anything. We can disable this. So this would now suggest to me that our change minutes to hours is not actually changing the minutes to hours. Right, so we stick a breakpoint in here. And this is only going to fire after a minute. And is it going to fire? Is the question. And it's not that. So it's in here. Right, so it's going in here. And it already exists. Now, so what I'm looking at here because I'm not 100% sure, and this is another debug method, is we can look at our data points, right? Now, there's quite a lot of them, I would agree, but at least some of them should be set to hours. Okay, if we're going in and changing stuff. Okay, we can resume that. So we should have something with hours. So we just need to keep looking. There's a minute. Right, now, at this point, it appears to me there's nothing with hours, okay? So, for whatever reason, we are not changing stuff to hours. Now, another way to do this is going to be stop. I'm going to disable that breakpoint, okay? And then what we shall do is go back to our event graph, okay? And we know this runs once per minute, consolidated minutes. Okay? So what we can do is pull in our data points and then for each. Now we're obviously going to remove this after we bug test it. We're going to break that, and then we're going to say if that equals hours, then we're going to branch now. Guys, if you guys are developing, don't be afraid to do a little bit of code like this just to debug, because you can just delete it again, right? So don't be afraid to write a little bit of extra code that's going to help you in the long term with some bug fixing issues and whatever. As I said, you can always remove it later. Right, we're going to say print string and then we're just going to print out the product name, okay? Doesn't really matter, all we want to do is see something. Okay, and we'll stick it up for 5 seconds, and I'll tell you what I'll do an append so that we can stick it into the middle of the screen. Okay. We'll put it there. It's going to be blue, and that can go in there for now. We can save that. And then if this basically gives us nothing after a couple of minutes, then we know we've got an issue that nothing is getting changed to hours. Right, which means that we've got a problem with our code that is changing minutes to hours. Okay, it doesn't really matter what the data is here, if it's just bauxite or anything else. All of them are handled the same way, so that doesn't make any difference. The point of actually joining this stuff up is so that it continues to produce and doesn't automatically stop, which it will do if product gets backed up. Okay, so now we're going. And if you look at our graph now, okay, so as I said, this is going to take a little minute. So what I'll do is I'm going to have a look in Discord at Dante's thing and see what the issue is. If you are still there, Dante, let me know. Okay. Dante, are you still there? Or has Dante disappeared? Right. So I'm going to say that our stuff isn't quite working properly. Okay, Dante. I think what you're going to have to do is make sure that your material is set to the correct thing. Okay? And by set to the correct thing, I'm trying to find the material for this. Right, let's have a look at materials. We'll have a look at a basic material. Okay, can we have a look at a basic material? Right. So what you'll need to do is make sure that this is set like this. Surface, opaque. And as you can see, mine is set up exactly the same way. Right? And you can see that we have our material, normal. We have our 3 different channels for ambient occlusion, roughness and metallic, and we have our base color, also known as the albedo, right? But some things depend on whether you've got this set up here. Like for some things you'll be using translucent, which is then going to change your different options here. Like if I choose translucent, it's going to give me an opacity option, but it's going to stop other ones. But this is the basic setup. Okay? So hopefully you can take a look at that and check how your thing's going, if it's actually set up properly. And I can check this to find out why it's not working. Right, so it's in here that we're not changing things for some reason. And there's the answer. Does minute data exist? Right, we shouldn't be doing does minute data exist. We should be doing does our data exist? Right? So basically all we need to do is duplicate this, and we can change this to does our data exist. Now we could make this more compact by like making this a generic function where we pass in the time period, but for just now we can just leave it at this, right? And for this we basically change this out for this. Now, what you got to remember is I kind of copied code, right? Well, I did copy code. And it does make the code base bigger, but it's kind of not going to make it that much bigger. Right, so as I said, we could make this a more generic function, but for the moment we're really just checking the hours to find out if the hours is working, right? So again, we can fire this up. And I think between streams today, I'm going to check the save so that I know that it isn't quite saving the conveyor belts properly. And I just need to check on that to see why. And then maybe it's just a quick fix. I've already got a sneaking suspicion on why it's not working. So we shall have to take a look at that, because it's going to make all of this, doing this over and over again, a lot easier and a lot, well, I'm not going to have to do it over and over again basically. I'm just going to have to start it back up again. Which, anything that saves you time as far as testing in such a complicated system, you know, it's going to help. Okay, so we'll leave that running for a minute. And this is the type of thing where you really want to do a, are there any questions in chat while we wait on this doing that? Okay, well, I'm going to grab a cigarette. We shall leave this running and hopefully we'll get some data soon. I shall be back in a moment. Okay guys, so do we have data? That's the question. Do we have data? And we should be able to tell well, it should print up stuff here, but it's only going to do it once per minute. There we go, we've got data. So we now have our data. Right, it isn't correct yet, we know that. And we're adding stuff, so that's good. Right, now this is going to be weird probably. Now the interesting thing, and I'm going to actually have to have a look here, is to have a look at the data points and find out what the hours actually say as far as the value goes. Okay, we know that there's definitely hour data there, but we don't know how it has been categorized yet. And this is where your debugging becomes a bit tough. Or not tough, but certainly not as easy. Okay, and apparently now we know that these are going to move up. So these are going to move up to quite high. So we should have like hours. Right, so there we've got hours. And that's 4 hours. Which is kind of weird, but kind of right. And we can see we've got 2 values for 4. Right, which is not right. Right, so all of these are saying 4 for some unknown reason. Well, to be fair, it won't be an unknown reason. That one's got 5 minutes. That one's got 5 for hours. Okay. And that one's got the 4. So this has got 1. Okay. So this is returning our data. We don't want to look at that. So we want to look in here. And if it does have the hour data, we return the value and that. Okay. change minutes to hours. Okay, so if this is false, we add this thing here, but then we have to actually add the quantity, which we do here. In this case, we add it together. And then we delete the previous data point, which is right. Okay. But the issue here should be that we don't return this time here, right? Change minutes to hours. What we can do is, where do we change the seconds to minutes? Here, this is the remove after 2. Right, and at this point, we are fundamentally changing that to 2. Okay, so in change minutes to hours, this should not be this value here, because at the end of the day it has to be 4. So again, what we have to do here is actually divide that by 60. So everything up to 100 minutes is going to be hour 0. Okay? So in here we're going to have to change the time as well, right? So this is going to have to go here, and it's also going to have to go here. So we test again. Now when we get our hour data, every single one of our hour datas should basically say 0. I'm going to stop it. Right, I'm not going to divide it by 60, I'm going to divide it by 5. But what I'm going to, yeah, I'm going to divide it by 5. Right, because otherwise we're not ever going to get new data. It's always going to be, unless we wait an hour and a half, everything is basically going to say 0. Okay. Hey Kaiser, how are you doing? I am working on my game. Right, and we are currently working on some graphs. Production graphs, to be precise. So we'll up the workers, we'll get our graph up. No, I haven't made a video on it yet. Well, there's about 60 development videos if you want to look at my channel. Right, so unfortunately we need to wait a minute for this. I'll appreciate your optimism, but I'm not so sure it would be great. Right, we should start having an iron sheet now. Except I didn't set it. Damn it. We should get iron sheet now. And widgets. There we go. Got iron sheet now. And I need to do something to lighten here, because the game would look so much better if you could actually see that these were iron sheets and these were actual widgets. Right, you can see them going along, but it just doesn't give off the right ambience. Right, not that's to the point, because we're working on graphs, but anyway. Right, so we've got data, but not a lot. We can switch this to the minute one. And we still have to wait a second or two. And we should start getting some iron sheet and widget data soon. Yeah, here comes the iron sheet. Right, so now we have minute data. Which is great. Where is our widget data? I'm sure it will come on soon. And we have data in our hour data now. And of course, what we've got to remember here is it's taking it out of the minute data after 3 minutes, right? And putting it into the hour data. So we're getting nothing there. But we shouldn't get anything there for another minute. No, actually, it should be another 5 minutes. Ah, damn it. In fact, will it even be that? I don't know if this is even going to change. Oh, it should. But this might require a bit more work offline. Because we should be returning data here, right? So if we're returning our data, right? Add breakpoint there. Right, so we definitely are doing stuff here, right? So that you see that -2. Now that's actually okay. Zoom that. Now I'm just wondering. I'm going to disable that, right? And resume that, but what we're going to check is when we actually return data, Like, where is it? Right. Where are we doing this? Set plot scale. Where am I returning the data? Is it in the actual graph? Getting myself confused now, which is never a good thing, but anyway. Right, so it must be in here. Except it's not. Right, I didn't think it was in there. Right, where is this? Right. Set range. Right, so it's not that one. That's set plot scale. Right, this is it here. It was just because there was a bit of a space. Right, so what I want to do is I want to have a look at this and see what this data says. Time, -6, -5. Now the scary thing here is it's got data points without a product. That kind of scares me. And then the -5, -6 kind of scares me. Okay, so those are two probable bugs. Okay, now it seems to be the first time we go in and create that. It seems to be at 0.0. Okay, it's got a problem. So we're back into here. And yep, that's okay. That's okay. OBS is Streamlabs is having a bit of a fit. My computer has decided to have a mind of its own for a minute or two. Right, what I think we'll do is we shall call it there. So if you've enjoyed the stream, hit the subscribe and like button, check out the description for my Discord, Patreon and previous game on Steam, and I shall be back in 4 hours. We shall be taking a look at hopefully fixing this and finding out what the problem is, and hopefully OBS will start behaving itself. So I shall see you then. Bye bye for now.